Hello, everyone. Hi, thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome. And we are just going to wait a couple seconds to allow folks to filter in, and then I'll jump into some housekeeping items. In the meantime, you can take a look at our wonderful slide here. Great headshot and get really excited for our chat today. I know I am, so. Okay, so my name is Jenna Quinn, and it's my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement to welcome you all to this 49er Industry Chat. Before we start the housekeeping items, I just want to inform everyone that this session is being recorded. And so what that means for you primarily is that this is going to be available for you on demand at our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni. This is a webinar format, so we're going to encourage you to use that Q&A box to submit any questions that you have for our guest speaker today. Don't wait until the end. As soon as the question pops into your mind, throw it in the chat, and we'll get that relayed to our moderator, so that way you can be a part of that dialogue. And so now with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, John Broadway. John is a proud alumnus of CSULB, graduating in 2017 with a degree in journalism. As a student, he was very involved in campus life as a president ambassador, founding president of the National Association of Black Journalists, and a participant of the Leadership Academy. John has found a way to merge his passions of filmmaking and social justice through his production company, Artifice United, which produces films, events, and merchandise that merge art and activism. He has remained involved with the beach as an active volunteer, and we're very thankful for his time. So John, with that, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenna, for that. I have the great pleasure of introducing Lendl, who actually knew during my time at Long Beach State. Lendl is a people manager. He sharpened his teeth at Long Beach State as the fraternity president of Sigma Alpha Epsilon, and he continued his development and leadership through various levels of operations in Southern California tech world known as Silicon Beach. And after 8 years of navigating the tech world from Snapchat to Bird, Lendl has now found a home at TikTok, where he continues to expand what it means to be a leader. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Lendl Punzalan. Hope I got that right.
Yeah, close enough.
Feel free to correct me. But yeah, Lendl, so great to have you here. And yeah, I guess to start, let's just hear a little bit about kind of what brought you to Long Beach State and like what your experience was like here at the beach.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm really happy to be here, back to contributing to the journey for everyone as an alumni for Long Beach. But it feels like so long ago. I transferred in to Long Beach State at fall 2012. I was already 21 at the time. I was really thinking I was going to do something out of high school, go to crazy colleges after how involved I was, and my journey started with community college. And after I'd realized like what it actually meant to be able to go to community college and what that kind of did for my timeline, I had a really hard time because I felt like I was just perennially behind. But through the experience and after having transferred in, I finally got my way to Long Beach. It was my favorite school of all the ones that I had applied to because I had a lot of friends that were here already, and I had experienced a little bit of what it was like to be a student on the campus through some activities like grab dates in the Greek system. So I felt like I had already a pretty good scope of what it meant to be a Long Beach student. And then when I got here, I completely flipped the script because I had no idea what kind of opportunities were going to be, laid out in front of me. It started with rushing a fraternity. That was the first thing I wanted to do because my sister was in the Greek system, and she was in the Greek system at Berkeley at Cal. And I had gone to a couple events when I may or may not have been underage, but I was definitely going to football games with their fraternities at times and learning what it meant, what kind of activities you can get yourself into while also being a student who's studying microbiology or trying to ace their finance midterm. So after romanticizing what it meant to be in the Greek system, I thought I had to take the opportunity myself. And I landed in Sigma Alpha Epsilon. They, to me, honestly, they felt like a project house in the sense that it was pretty clear to me that they were in the middle of a rebuild. I was already 21 at the time, so I was already actually older than a majority of the active class. So I saw very clearly, I was like, oh, they're really trying to essentially rebrand or rework themselves through this, through this rush process. And I wanted to make the most of my experience. And I felt like they would be the house that I would really be able to learn quite a bit about, not just, the culture of what it was, but also learn a lot about myself at the time. So I joined, and it was the best experience that I could have ever asked for in terms of the people that I met along the way, as well as the opportunities that, that it afforded me. Of course, not everything was sunshine and daisies. What I mentioned before, I was a bit older than a lot of the active class at the time. So I actually became president in the middle of my pledge semester. And while I was trying to rush the fraternity, they made me the president to lead this organization. So there's only like about 40 of us at the time, but I was among the most experienced in any sort of leadership positions, just based off of things I had done at work, and then also extracurricular activities while I was in the community college system. And yeah, being in a leadership position of a lot of a group of young men is difficult, especially when you consider all of the variables that could potentially go wrong, from, liability insurance at philanthropy events, or honestly having a party and someone getting too intoxicated. It runs the gamut of all the things that could be. And it unfortunately came to a head one semester. And John, I'd actually like to lob this back to you, because you were not directly involved, but you were indirectly involved in the sense that you were in the Greek system. Once upon a time, we had a party and someone walked home drunk, and they made a phone call, and they actually were, robbed at the time. And they had mentioned that they got jumped by a house, by Sigma Pi. But what was actually meant to be said was they got jumped in the area of, like, I was by McDonald's, I was jumped by Sig Pi. But how the person interpreted the call, who was actually at our house, interpreted as the other Sigma Pi, the other fraternity, actually jumped our friend. So naturally, everyone's testosterone goes through the roof. And, we rode our way over there to figure out what was happening. It led to an unfortunate brawl. There's really no other way to say it. And we were completely in the wrong. There's really no way. And I take full accountability of, my part in that. Although we had tried to do our best to mitigate the situation and, calling ahead to the president and keeping everybody inside, tensions were already flaring. That's just unfortunately how it all went. And people got hurt, and people were arrested, myself included, just for being the president. But that was not just a blemish on the fraternity itself, but it was also a blemish on the Greek system, and then also what it meant to be a student at Long Beach, because, fraternities already have this rough and rowdy reputation, and I didn't want to contribute to that in any way. But the first thing that happens, or not the first thing, but in that semester, the first major thing that happens was this fight. So needless to say, it was a big stain on what I felt like was our reputation that was already tumultuous as is. So, John, I'd actually asked you the question of what was your perspective on it, and if you even had heard about it at the time.
Yeah, no, I remember that. It was I can't remember. I remember just being like very surprised, and just wanting to learn more, and also experiencing like that, or seeing how like it kind of like was this like blemish, and like how it kind of affects like the Greek system as a whole. And so that was kind of like my takeaway at the time. And yeah, I appreciate kind of hearing you just reflect on like a lot of the experiences that you went through, as a leader, and then the Greek system, and just as a leader, as a student. I definitely resonate with a lot of them. Just kind of have a similar experience as a president of fraternity as well. I'm just curious, like, how do you feel like your involvement in campus life in general, whether it be fraternity or other organizations, kind of translated directly into your career experience and like your career leadership? Like, what were some of the lessons that you're able to take from that to help propel you?
Yeah, so if I could sum it up into 2 words, I would say it's why not? And that's largely due to, if you're a student and you just go to class, your opportunity to do more than being a participant is if you're like the group leader, or if you're somehow involved for like we call it herding cats, right? Getting all your other students that are in your group project, including the one who's not going to do anything and still get full credit, and getting them all together to get the project done. So the entire time I had this perspective of I just want to learn as much as possible. So I want to put myself in positions that I'm both really excited to, check out, but then also I'm uncomfortable in the sense that I've never done before. So that innate curiosity, I think it helps navigate what you do and do not want to do. The $1 million question all of us get asked is, what do you want to do when you grow up or when you're out of college? And I think for so many of us, it's veiled in the sense of like, I just want to make good money that I can support myself. But we're all trying to find this purpose that we don't really know for ourselves, because this is our time where we're trying to find ourselves. I didn't have the luxury of saying that I wanted to be a doctor and following through with it since I was a child. But, that whole journey kind of led me to this curiosity. So to actually go back to that, the story for the fraternity fight, through the judicial process, the stress of actually trying to take care of that and making all these court hearings and meeting with the Long Beach, judicial board, and trying to go to class, it just didn't work out. And I tried my best to save the people as opposed to saving myself, instead of, making sure I go to school. So I ended up actually getting kicked out of school. I lost my ability to attend school, and I had to essentially fight my way back to reinstatement because my grades had just slipped, and it was just too far gone at that point. So at that point, it was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to roll over. I'm going to try to figure it out. And along the way, opportunities started to present themselves. I happened to be working at the marketing department for the athletics program. They happened to have Beach Vision become a part of the athletic board, which is when we got that huge jumbotron for the Long Beach pyramid. And I had always dabbled in video editing. So when the opportunity came up and they were like, oh, we're looking for people to be involved with this video program, I was like, why not? Let's see what happens. So I was able to still be connected to the campus, even though I was actually not a student. I got kicked out. And that fostered a real strong community for myself, in the sense of what I saw, even through the lens of the camera, as I was a replay operator for the most part. I was watching behind the scenes what it meant when we beat Hawaii in volleyball. Actually, when we beat Hawaii in basketball too, but just to see how all of the reaction in the alumni and how much everyone is really tied to the campus. So through that, I was ready. Before that, I was actually ready to potentially just go back to the drawing board and reapply elsewhere, because I thought that the reputation that I had developed because of this incident would stain how my journey would be through this whole thing. So I tried to, at that time, figure out what was the best way forward. And at that time, it was potentially going to a new school. But instead, after being tied to the community for so long and being tied to this what I saw through the athletics program, I knew that I had to see this thing through, and I wanted to learn one major thing from this time frame, which was resilience. So I would say that the trauma of what had happened, of being kicked out, and having that conversation with my parents, which is definitely not an easy one, being looked at as, I don't want to go as far as to say it's like you're like a leper in the community, but being responsible for the reputation that everybody is now attached to, yourself included, John, as a leader of the fraternity. But seeing my way through and making sure that I can get reinstated through the CCPE, which was a long 4-year journey, as well as making sure that I had the opportunity to hopefully amend some of those things that were essentially broken through our time at the fraternity system. I think that what I took away from that is truly resilience. And now, as I make my way through the world that I'm in now, the tech world, resiliency plays a huge part, because no 2 days are the same. And I know every company is going to say that, but when I was at Snapchat, I'll give you this example. The first job I had after college was Snapchat. One day, Kylie Jenner had a tweet that was like, I missed the old Snapchat because like a new update had gone up. And that caused like a whole, because she was like our biggest thing at the time for Snapchat, and it caused a whole departmental like snafu. Everyone was freaked out. The stocks were plummeting because people were freaked out about like how are we gonna aid the Jenners and make sure that we're showing that we are listening to them as they're some of our biggest people on the platform. And the heads rolled and people got fired. A lot of people lost their jobs. And it's one of those things where if you're not fully bought in and you're not resilient to the fact that you could potentially work in that environment, it's definitely a scary, scary time. So it's like your ability to navigate that, your ability to remain resilient and to not detach yourself, even when fear is kind of the purveying factor. It really helps paint a better picture for how you can get through this part of work, but then also potentially in other things in life too. Maybe it's having family and having the resiliency of like your personal health or the health of someone else. And I do think that there is a microcosm of learning that through what had happened to myself in the Greek system, and then taking those reps that I took in, getting, let go from this or losing my ability to attend the school, and then also getting reinstated. I think those were laying the building blocks for what eventually led to resiliency on my end, now working in the tech world, and then understanding that goes a long way in my own personal development.
Yeah.
It's a long answer.
Well, no, it's a great answer. And I mean, I resonate so much with it just because, I had a very winding educational journey. And then as you mentioned as well, too, I was able to apply that lesson of like resiliency and also like the importance of companion dues when you're like entering like a new industry. Those are lessons I learned directly from like the fraternity experience I was able to apply to my career journey that I found helpful. And another thing was that resonated with earlier on that you said that I want to go back to, because I feel like many others might have a similar experience. You mentioned coming into Long Beach State when you were 21, which I was 22, by the way, when I entered Long Beach State. So, we have that similarity as well. But, I kind of also had that feeling of being perennial behind, like you said. And I think, other people, that's a very common thing in this culture, right? As we're looking outwards, so with social media and other things, right? Like it's very common for us to feel behind, right? And for that to affect us. So for, other students who like have this feeling of being perennially behind, right? What like advice do you give for them to kind of like get or move past that, right? And like make the most out of whatever they're trying to do?
Yeah. So my thesis for this conversation is perspective is power. And the reason why it is what it is specifically because of time. Time is a construct. Time is arbitrary, blah, blah, blah. You're going to hear all that throughout your whole lives. If you have a sibling, let alone a successful sibling who's older or potentially worse for you, younger, you're going to feel that even more. The idea of comparison kind of, it really permeates in any capacity. It's from athletics of being faster or being able to jump higher to education when you're getting the better grade or you're the person who's affecting the curve, right? So that is going to be there essentially no matter what. What I've come to realize though, especially as I've gone through all that I've gone through in my work at this point, and what I'm trying to continue to encourage others to do is I want to make sure that people understand that your perspective on what is happening is going to determine how you're going to really internalize all that stuff. Being in community college and going in from high school, that was already the first strike for me when I was like, damn, I messed up. Something happened. Being in community college is not, it was not the move, and it was not in my idea of a plan. My sister didn't do that. Why am I doing that? Why am I in this school with all these like older people who don't feel like they want to be here, but they're here? All those little things start nagging at you after a while. And then it didn't click immediately. It definitely took a while to click. I would say in year 2, it clicked, but in year 2, it got to the point where I stopped thinking so much about where I was in relation to time. And I started thinking about what my effect is with what I'm doing. So at that time, that's when I started to think about, okay, I'm not just going to go to school, because my first year of community college, I just went to school. No opportunities, didn't do anything on the side. I had a side job. I was a lifeguard once upon a time. But yeah, so my second year, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to try to find myself in such a way that I can affect more of what's happening at school. Through that, I became the director of philanthropy and community service, because we were organizing events at the community college level, and we were trying to just restore the community and do what we could to, build better parks or raise money for fundraising. And that in and of itself, I stopped thinking so much about timeline, and I started thinking about project to project. How can I affect most of what I want to get myself involved in? And then everything just kind of started to fall into place, because when I was busy with all these things that I felt were fulfilling and I wanted to be a part of, I stopped thinking so much about where I was in relation to who I was trying to chase. I'm always going to be chasing something. We are all, each of us are always going to be chasing someone. And the idea that you are either far behind or, ahead of the pack I think is completely arbitrary. What I've now chosen to value with the perspective that I have is, are you just in motion? And if you're in motion and you're mobilizing your feelings, then are you on that path to, help get what you want? And is that going to be more valuable to you than actually being where you think you're going to be? Because you're going to get to this point where you make X amount of money and you're like, oh, I always want more. There's always something more to chase. You're going to get this title. I always want another title afterward. Oh, I'm a manager. I want to be a director. Oh, I'm a director. I want to be a CEO. Everything just kind of gets into this point where it's never enough. And if your idea of success is just feeling that never enough, that can be pretty toxic to majority of us, because it's drowning in the sense of never being enough. And being enough is so integral to, what it means to be a member of this society. So instead, I've chosen to look at it in terms of, am I on the way? If, you can stagnate, things can slow down. You could also take back steps, but at the very least, after those moments, do you find yourself kind of rolling the ball back up the hill, trying your best, even though it may seem fraught, but you're still doing your best to get this thing in motion? Because if you're continuing your journey, no matter what you do, if you can shift your perspective into you're on your way, then it'll benefit you more in the long run, as opposed to, look how far I am from myself to a peer who's already up the mountain. If you're taking baby steps, you're still going to get there eventually.
Yeah. I love that so much, because there's just so much empowerment that comes with like owning, right, and your perspective, like understanding it, right, and like using it in a healthy way, right, as opposed to like allowing yourself to feel behind and like always compare and things like that. So I think that was all spot on. I'm curious, how do you feel like you were very intentional in like using like that idea and that perspective, right, in your career journey, right? And like, can you see how like that may have affected it in a positive way as you've navigated it?
Yeah, I'm 32 now. I feel like I've finally aged into the body of the perspective that I've always had. Like when I was 15, I felt like I was already kind of 30. And I don't know what it is about it, but there was like a responsibility that I felt about trying to, get the most for everybody. I was an ASB president in high school. I just wanted to bring everybody together. I was trying to be as intentional as possible when it came to, what I was involved with, specifically because I wanted to have myself be a part of something greater. So that was oftentimes what was driving me of, how can I learn from these experiences? How can I learn from, these organizations? How can I learn from these people? And again, that's why my mantra is perspective is power, because it's easy to learn from someone else. It's easy in the sense that you could ask a question and you can learn a perspective. But it is difficult to learn from yourself. It's difficult to be critical of yourself. It's easy to judge others. It's very hard to judge yourself at times, because you have to be very obvious. I have to be very obvious in the sense that I allowed, as a person responsible for attorney, it's not that I directly allowed this to happen, but the response at that moment was something that happened under my watch, and it was something I take accountability for. But that is a very easy opportunity to just look back and be like, that guy was an idiot. I shouldn't have let him rush the fraternity anyway. The alumni didn't help me enough. The university just was too hard on me. And it's too easy to point the fingers elsewhere. So that is what I, again, feel like the priority of your journeys has to be within the perspective that you have of being critical of not just the people around you who are helping or are part of your journey, but then also of yourself, and then understanding where you are with everything and keeping everything moving forward.
Nice. And so, you mentioned like the importance of and the ease of learning from other people, right? And so I'm curious if mentors have played a role in your career journey, in your growth, and if so, like how did they impact your journey?
Mentorship is the end all be all. I think it's so difficult to find them, and then also it's not like when you meet one, they're just like, "Hi, I'm your mentor now. Nice to meet you." Right? That's not how that works. It's usually what I find. It's the people who just have a vested interest in you, and they also want to make sure that they look after your well-being. The most important person. I mean, I'm married, love my wife and my parents, of course, but the most important person in my personal and professional journey is my sister. I look up to her more than anything else, more than anyone else. She's 4 years older than me. She set the bar for what I looked at was success. And then also, although we're obviously siblings and that's kind of like a default, it was also a relationship that she and I worked on, because I had a very hard time trying to uphold the standard that she was met. Of course, because I was wrapped up in my mind of what it meant to be someone on my journey, because I was always looking at where she was on the mountaintop. But then it got to the point where I was like, how am I going to establish myself on my own? She was a lawyer. She of three, I think 2 or 3 jobs in the Asian American dream, being a doctor, being a lawyer, being someone in finance. And then to me, my parents were just like, what do? You work in tech? What's tech? God forbid I have to change my parents' Wi-Fi or, unplug the router and plug it back in after 20 seconds, like we all have to do for our parents at some point. That was not something that resonates with them. They were dentists. How would they know? So although I was doing well in my own personal individual career, I never felt like I was really winning the approval of my parents. Not that I needed to win it away from my sister, but just in general, because they couldn't really understand. And the first person to help me out of that funk was my sister. So mentorship kind of takes its form in, people around you in your close circle. Your mentors can also, the 5 people around you are the people who kind of establish who you are as a person. It can be as much as, the closest people around you in proximity, potentially familially. And then also taking mentorship from, I take a lot of mentorship from clips and also stories. Kobe was a mentor in the terms of work ethic. Mamba mentality is a thing that sounds really corny to a lot of people, but to people like ourselves who grew up playing basketball, it meant so much more, because it was bigger than basketball, is like what a lot of people like to say. Even in terms of, movies, I think about like Robin Williams' character in Good Will Hunting. I'm a big movie guy, so I'm going to stop with the movie references there. But the way that his character navigates the psychology of, nurturing a young Matt Damon who has all this trauma, it's a very interesting way to navigate that. And he was a mentor without actually being that, because he was just doing that because he was from the same part of Boston, from Southeast. So I try to find mentorship in between the lines of what it means to be a mentor, in the sense that it doesn't have to physically exist within a person who is in charge of you or leading you. It exists for myself and people that I admire and people that I want to do my best to to involve within my life and to push forward, because they're pushing me as much as I'm pushing them. I'm older than my wife whom I met in the Greek system of Long Beach. It was love at first beer pong. That's just, what happened to us back in the day. But yeah, I am her mentor and she is mine. And no matter where we are in our careers, it's less about who's further and it's more about how are we pushing each other forward. And I think mentor gets lost in the idea that it has to be Dumbledore. It has to be someone like that that's really helping you in your journey. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. There are no Dumbledores in the world, or Gandalfs. I mean, there are, but they're definitely not as common as you might think. Your version of a mentor could easily be a best friend who kind of feels like they have it all figured out, but then at the same time never makes you feel like you don't. And their relationship with you as you're trying to figure it out is how you're being pushed forward.
Yeah, I love that, right? Like utilize all of the outlets of mentorship that exist around us and like being able to identify those. Yeah. And I think that's cool that you mentioned Kobe as one of your mentors. I actually wrote an article recently saying how like I'm mentored by a deceased person, and it's Kobe, you know, through little clips
Yeah.
and just them all. So that wisdom
Exactly.
exists all of us. But you know, okay, so going to what you said earlier about you know, you working in tech, right? And this being something that parents didn't understand, right? Maybe wasn't like ideal compared to what your sister was doing, right? I'm curious, you know, like what then like drew you to tech, right? Like what do you find about it that like kind of like sparked your interest and your passion? And like what I guess advice would you offer for folks who are might be interested in the field or maybe don't know much about it and like I want to check it out?
Yeah, this is actually kind of funny because I'm currently sitting in like the mountaintop of what people think tech is. Like this is I can come off as like a tech bro all I want, you know. It's just I happen to be in this industry. I started at Snapchat, was a contractor, I worked for them for a while, got laid off, and was three months unemployed. And then the next company I found myself in was Bird. I know some of you have ridden those electric scooters. I'm sure some of you have fallen off of those electric scooters. Sorry about it. You know, right there, customer support line. I was among the first 50 people that worked at that company, and it was incredible because at that point, that's what I saw. For me at least, that's what I saw what Snap wasn't. To me, Snap was communication, and it was communication that was oftentimes like inappropriate, to be honest. So I didn't really feel very attached to what we were doing, although what we were doing was cool because it was on the cutting edge. And also, honestly, it was sexy. It's like, wow, you work at Snapchat, that's so cool. You work in Venice Beach now, damn, that's so cool. And then I went to Bird, and Bird was like this up and coming, the first of its kind micromobility company in Santa Monica. And I found out that what I really valued from that job, or what that time was we had a mission. And the mission was we're all Los Angelinos for the most part. The mission was to alleviate traffic because we all know how much time we spend in the car. So what I was doing had less impact of how I felt about the job as opposed to what the job was, what the company was trying to do. Because we truthfully were trying to make an impact in communities of riding a scooter. And although it sounds really trivial and it sounds kind of corny and funny, I mean, first of all, have you ridden one? Because they are a blast. Go down 2nd Street on a scooter, it's pretty rad. But
I love it.
you know, exactly. I just, you know, don't do a tandem, wear a helmet if you can, you know, be that guy, that person. But yeah, so being able to be a part of that identity for what the company was or what the company was trying to do meant a lot to me. It was about the mission. And then after a while, I felt like, okay, what I was learning in Bird kind of checked all the boxes that I was looking for. And then I started getting poached from this company called TikTok. And I was like, what the hell is TikTok? What is this music note? What is Musical.ly, which is what I guess what the original company was. And I kid you not, the first reaction I had was like, oh my God, I'm going to be potentially working for a company that is responsible for cringy material that is encouraging all of the kids these days to lip sync to the new Kesha. I say Kesha. Why did I say Doja Cat song? You know what I mean? Like it felt really, really corny. And I started to think about Vine. I loved Vine. It was so contained, 6 seconds, perfect. But because of that, you really saw creativity and you saw the culture kind of shift in how it wanted to communicate, which was in short form video. So I was like, okay, why not? Just like what I said earlier, why not? Let's see what happens. And as soon as I joined the company and I started really understanding what it took to be a part of a company like this, I started to understand what the effect was on culture. We keep the culture. There is no question about it. The culture of what is today. TikTok has all the fingerprints on it because of how many people use it. Now, is that for the sake of the good or the worsening of our culture? It's kind of up for you to decide. I'm just, from my point of view as a person who works at TikTok, specifically in trust and safety, is we're trying our best to make sure you don't see harmful content that we see, that we internalize, because we want to make sure that the platform of mostly 10-year-olds doesn't see this hate speech, this harmful content, this misinformation that just goes, that happens to be a large part of our culture. So youth culture is kind of what the mission was. It's preserving youth culture. We should all have the freedom to be able to experience the world that is light and happy. And, you can learn. I learned so much more from TikTok than I ever thought I would ever do. It's kind of upsetting, actually, because, well, not upsetting, but like, it just kind of checks boxes for you. I'm like, why is this the 30th woodworking video that I've seen today? And why am I still watching this person take dirt out of a horseshoe? Like, what is it about myself that I'm learning through this app? But I get to humanize people all across the world in a matter of seconds because of this platform. And I get to see perspectives of people who live in the barrios or who live in the favelas of Brazil, or who live in my home country in the Philippines. And I get to see them take on the same challenges that, Austin Butler does, because he's doing this like Elvis, leg shaking thing, or the Jenners are, because we still value them very highly in our society for some reason, and things of that sort. So yeah, there's now I've shifted my way into thinking that what I wanted to do was because it was the coolest thing. And now I think more that it's less about what's cool and it's more about what's the impact. And I stopped thinking and attaching myself to what I felt like what was valuable, which was, again, what was cool, what was sexy. And I started to attach myself to the work and the opportunities that are provided. The core job of my personal job now at TikTok is to create jobs. It's to create an opportunity for people to protect the platform. And once I started to think in that framework, as opposed to, we were helping to spread hate, or not helping to spread hate speech. We were losing a battle of stopping the spread of hate speech. And it became more about the opportunities that we were providing people, getting people jobs through COVID, for example. How hard was it in that time to potentially work in tech, or to understand what it meant to work from home? And we were able to be an industry leading partner that tried to buck up against those trends and give people these opportunities to both help our platform, protect our platform, but then also to potentially skill other people. And that was the perspective that I started to shift my way towards, as opposed to what I was previously, which was just like, wait, what was my title again? Global Partnerships Management. Ooh, head of partnerships. You can fall in love with position all you want. You can fall in love with company all you want. But at the end of the day, what are you doing? And what is it helping? I would be totally happy being a partnerships manager for a sewage company if it meant that what we were doing was keeping our waters clean. I happen to work at TikTok, and it happens to be the cool thing of the culture right now. But I would feel the same gratitude to be able to do what I'm doing, knowing that I'm keeping the water clean, and I'm focused on the mission of, aiding our communities, as I am for the culture that I'm doing here at TikTok.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of like what really shaped my career journey as well too, from like doing stuff that like just seemed more like cool and accessible to like, okay, what am I really like trying to impact and do in this world? It's cool to see kind of how that shaped your journey as well too. And so I'm curious, what does, in your role, right? Like, what does it look like a normal day in the office, or I guess working from home, in your position, in your department?
Yeah. So another reference, hopefully not obscure, but it might be a generational thing. I think right now the really popular way is that meme of the dog in the burning building, and it's just like, everything is fine. That's usually what the day is. For myself, I look at it more of, I don't know if anyone remembers when SpongeBob had to work at a fancy restaurant for Squidward, and he tells him to forget everything and just think fancy, and all the little SpongeBobs in his head run around. Again, I'm probably dating myself with this, which is really, really upsetting. I think that's the elder millennial thing, but yeah. Yeah. The government is trying to cancel us. The public thinks that we are a China spy app, essentially, because of how many people are using it and how it permeates, the culture. And I'm specifically trying to show how much of our business is on US soil, and to help really give us the identity of a separate partner who we happen to be in the parent company of, but has no insight on what we're doing. So as of right now, it's definitely it can be a little scary. In 2020, Trump engaged in open warfare with us, with the platform. That was scary because, you know, it doesn't feel good to have a president openly condemn your platform. It feels really, really strange. But now it's about what narrative are we trying to work towards to help with the overall kind of goings of what's happening. So we're doing our best to be an open book. We're you know, our data centers, I don't want to get too much in the weeds of it, but our data centers are on US soil. There's no connection with any of the Chinese industry. And we're just trying to, again, do our best to protect the platform. Trust and safety. We want to inspire trust, and we want to keep all of you safe. You don't need to see what we see on the back end. You don't need to see the kind of words that get thrown around when it's a holiday that you think has nothing negative about it. You know, it's Black History Month currently, and you don't think that you would see or hear anything negative about it, but there are voices that have the ability to do so, and it gets spread on platforms like this, and it gets shared, and it eventually finds its way into a 9-year-old who has an iPad and is doing iPad time because mom needs a break, dad needs a break. I get it. I'm an uncle. I definitely have to do that every now and then, but it's mortifying knowing that those things are out there. It's mortifying knowing that you can scroll up and the next video you see is potentially self-harm. So what we're doing is, at its core, trying to enlist as many human moderators as possible to prevent this stuff from being seen. And notice I said human moderators, and that's specifically because, do you trust your app, your algorithm, your machines to do what you would want to do? If you were driving down the freeway and you were driving next to a Tesla and the person in the front of in the driver's seat was sleeping, would you be like, oh, what a cool perk? Or would you slow down or speed up because you don't want to be anywhere near that car? And that's where I want the public to know that's where we are operating. We're trying to keep the eyes human, and we're trying to keep the algorithm human, because with that human perspective, we're able to help shape the narrative around what is trust and what is safety. And we're able to protect our users from potentially, you know, encountering some of these things. So yeah, it's an interesting time because of what's happening currently, but it's a time that I value because, again, it kind of goes back to resiliency. It's where are you with how comfortable and how secure you are with, you know, what you've learned about yourself, and how can you utilize that to, you know, keep moving the needle forward. And that's what I've come to really value. And I especially value the fact that I'm not scared. I'm not scared of the landscape right now. In fact, I'm encouraged, because I would much rather people question as opposed to just kind of openly, you know, being force-fed whatever is coming down their throat. It's just being on this side of the curtain is difficult, but I'd rather it be difficult than we're just, you know, kind of aimlessly and mindlessly just spinning the wheel at this point.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you kind of ended on just not being scared, just because we actually have questions from the audience where they want to know, like, what are your thoughts on all of the layoffs that are going on in the tech industry that are making headlines?
Layoffs are a bummer, obviously. I mean, there is openly, people will talk about projects within tech world, or I know really any world, any company that you work in that is specifically around being lean, you know, being lean for the summer, having washboard abs, like that sounds great. But being lean in the world of work can feel very daunting, because that point that you can find yourself in is something of distrust that you would have with your own company, something that you would value, that you would think that you would have no part in. So yeah, those cuts have been very scary in the sense of what has been happening. However, I as a person in the tech industry, I do look at the leadership. I do ask myself who's making these decisions and how things are being developed, and what's the messaging behind it. When I was at Bird, there was a layoff, a series of layoffs there while I was there and while I was afterwards. And when it's performance based, it kind of doesn't feel like anything because you're just like, oh, well, that person didn't really produce or whatever. However, you kind of come away with it. But then there's some that are just like, this is because we don't need everybody because work from home and we can cut costs this way. So we don't need all of you. And the messaging behind it, it becomes increasingly more important. I think we all have probably heard of that I forgot what company it was, but the CEO comes on and Zooms everybody and is just like, we're just going to let go of you. And he was really informal about it. I forget what company it was. So, in my perspective, it is the leadership. And I have full trust in our leadership because of, again, what they understand our mission is, how involved they are in us achieving our mission. And then also what it means to the larger company, because to the culture, because if we didn't exist, if our version of TikTok as it is didn't exist, it's going to be put into some other platform. And if it goes into some other platform, it'll potentially start over. And without that sophistication, you're gonna potentially see yourself already ramping up some pretty harsh things. You can take some turns in Reddit and Twitter and you're like, holy shit, I'm in the dark web. Like, where am I? I can hire an assassin on Reddit. Like, what is this? And that's exactly what I mean by TikTok. I'm not saying you can do that on TikTok, but without a company that you trust to, from the top down, to really help, stir that narrative, it really makes you think that, oh, this is all just going to go away. It's like, no, it's going to get funneled into the next thing. You think Instagram Reels is safe? Look what happened to Instagram. Instagram used to be about people and now it's about ads. So how then am I supposed to trust that it's not going to eventually become something else? Same with TikTok. Who knows what TikTok is going to be? But what I know where I am and why I have trust in my experience and my journey is I trust the messaging. I trust what we have currently at stake, and I trust what our leaders are doing as far as decisions being made to help get us there. So yeah, the idea of budget cuts and people getting laid off, it's definitely a part of working in any job. And I'll tell you right now, if I get fired tomorrow, I will do my best to find another company essentially like TikTok, or not necessarily like TikTok, but essentially with a vision and a mission that I know is as impactful as TikTok, because that is where I find value. Airbnb is a good example. Did any of you know that Airbnb has essentially a new program that they're working on that is essentially doing work for refugees? Russia, Ukraine is happening. There are neighboring communities that have Airbnb properties. And these people are being tapped on to be like, hey, can you open your home up, your Airbnb property where you're making profit? Can you open it up to the community? And people are saying yes. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing that I would love to be a part of. And did I explore an opportunity to do so? Absolutely. But again, it is a matter of where I find the value. And at that time, it didn't work out, but I am not, displeased with my time at TikTok. It's just, we all keep the doors open. We all want to hear, where we might be valued. So why not explore it? But I'll tell you this, when I heard about that opportunity, I was very, very taken aback, because I was like, how can you not want to sign up for something like that, where you're really, really physically helping people be safe in a time like this?
Yeah. 100%, man. Yeah, I think it was really, I can't think of the right word, but I like how you hinted towards the leadership, and how impactful that is and what we're seeing, right? And in the company overall, because I think that's something that gets forgotten about often. And it makes sense that you mentioned that, given, your journey has been so much driven by leadership, impacted by it. So yeah, I think we're getting close to our end, but just want to know if there was anything, last words you want to leave with the folks out there.
Last words. Okay. That was both cryptic and also very, I don't even know how to circle that back. Last words. What I would say is, when you have the opportunity to become or take the next step as a potential manager in this world, because you're a high performer, really reassess what that means for you. And the reason why I say that is because there is an adage that people say, you don't leave bad jobs, you leave bad managers. And a lot of times I think it's easy to kind of crucify the people that don't do it well for you. and you wonder why they weren't able to help you in the way that you needed help. So the communication of what it means, or the journey of professional development to be a manager and to also be managed, is a two-way street. And what I would really ask people is that when they're in a position of power, or where they're potentially being groomed for a position of power, what is your perspective on it? And how are you leveraging that perspective to do what needs to be done? I keep saying that perspective is power, and a lot of us are chasing after what it means to identify and how you identify yourself. And I invite all of you to really think about not just what you've done and how you've gotten there, but also what your impact is on other people. So if there was anything I would really hope that people take away from this, it's not just about looking at the actions that were taken and the people you've met along the way, but also looking at also asking everyone to look at how you actually interpreted those moments. I don't look back at getting kicked out of school with any malice. I don't look back at my time at Long Beach with anything other than absolute glee for everything that I've gotten from it, from opportunities to speak like this, to meeting my wife, lifelong friends, to school, to educate, all of those things. I don't look back with anything other than, gratitude. And if all you're doing is looking at your milestones, you might want to reassess what it means to have power within this whole thing. And you might want to look at who helped you along the way. So yeah, I would love to end with that, in the sense of perspective is power. And it's not just about what you learn, but it's also about it's not about who you learn from, but it's also about what you learn from yourself.
What a great way to end, man. I should appreciate this time. Yeah, I'll challenge you.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you both so much. I was a great chat. You guys both rocked that one. Lendl, we usually ask folks if they're if people out there, the alumni and current students, wanted to chat with you, get your perspective, kind of continue this conversation or pick your brain. What's the best way that they could possibly get in touch with you?
I mean, I could link my LinkedIn if they want to reach out. I'm always happy to chat on LinkedIn. Also, this was a great opportunity. I have mentorship. John asked the question of mentorship. Mentorship is very important to me now, because I realize how integral it was. And I'm looking at creating a way for people to have a more clear understanding of what mentorship is. So I would be a hypocrite if I didn't open my doors in that same way. So if I can leave my LinkedIn with you all to push out to everybody, anyone can feel free to message me. It's not as easy as just like, hey, can you get me a job at TikTok? So if you're going to start with that in mind, honestly, keep that to yourself. But if you're genuinely curious about what navigating not just the tech industry, but also just industry period, I would love to be a part of that conversation with you. And if there's another way that I can be a part of this for our 49er community, I'd be happy to do so as well.
Awesome, great. And I just want to ask, do you have a podcast that you're currently working on?
Yeah, so a lot of these things that I've said, as much as I wish that I just pulled them out of thin air, they are definitely pillars of a company that I'm trying to build a consulting firm. And the firm is dedicated to young professionals, specifically people coming right out of college, because a lot of you don't know what the hell you're doing. And I'm not going to tell you what you should be doing, but I am trying to create a way to help you navigate so that you don't feel so lost, specifically around management, specifically around being a top performer, or specifically around just trying to understand how you can create for yourself. That is something I've been working on, but I don't know. I found myself in a position of, imposter syndrome of what gives me the right to tell people that I know a way to get there. And I think it's natural for people to feel that way. So although that imposter syndrome has cooled it for a little while, it's definitely something that comes back every now and then. But I will say this conversation makes me feel like more in tune to that idea now more than ever. And I want to start rebuilding what that means. So yeah, I'm looking at creating a podcast for my yuppies out there to try to be to try to help them navigate this world post college, and hopefully more to come on that soon.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to share that out as well. All
Awesome.
right.
Thank
Well, I
you so
just
much.
wanted to say thank you both to you both. Great moderation, great chat. And we are so excited to be able to add this to our collection of resources for folks out there. For those of you tuning in, like I said, this will be available on our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni. And thanks so much for tuning in for this edition of the 49er Industry Chat. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.